Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome everyone to the SDG Global Festival of Action. For those joining now, my name is Marina Ponti and I'm the director of the UN SDG Action Campaign. I'm delighted to be the master of ceremony today of this very special panel organized by UNDP and United Cities and Local Government on reimagining our common future. The turning point starts locally. As you know, the Festival of Action is spotlighting 4 actions that can make 2021 a turning point for people and the planet. These are climate action, ending inequalities, achieving gender equality, and closing the financing gap. This inspiring panel will help us understand turning points in all of these areas that can start and gain steam at the local level, in localities and territories. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many of us have been confined to our homes and community, and still are. We are seeing how many issues intersect there. Risk to health and have spilled into our schools and jobs, transport system, and food supply. At the same time, communities have come together to slow the spread of this terrible disease. We change behavior. We have also looked to local services to help us keep us going and to maintain our lives and our dignity. At the UN SDG Action Campaign, we did not find this surprising. In fact, we have worked with local governments for many years, and we know that they are at the forefront of action on the SDG agenda. Due to their proximity to people, territories see issues and are expected not just to talk about them, but to solve them, often with creativity and innovation amidst scarce resources. It's now a pleasure to give the floor to Achim Steiner, UNDP Administrator, who will share his views and then moderate a very informal dialogue with 3 extraordinary mayors joining us from 3 continents. Ms. Thembi Nadiemeng, Mayor of Polokwane, President of the South African Local Government Association and UCLG co-president. Then we have Ms. Carolina Cosse, the Mayor of Montevideo and UCLG Vice President. And then we have José Manuel Ribeiro, Mayor of Valongo in Portugal. Together, they will lash out issues that can trigger a turning point at the local level. They will look specifically at shaping a new social contract that benefits people at large, achieving a recovery that is green and just, and they will also look at tools and mechanisms that can help financing the SDG at the local level. Let me end with a quote by John Lewis, also bearing in mind that 70% of the 20,000 people watching us live today are young. If you come together with a mission grounded with love and a sense of community, you can make the impossible possible. Thank you. Administrator, you have the floor.
Marina, thank you so much. I'm very grateful and very excited to be joining you, the 3 mayors, and many people around the world for this year's SDG Global Festival of Action. Now, it may seem a little counterintuitive that in the midst of this pandemic, when so many of us are in a situation where we are not able to act, whether we are in lockdowns, whether we are facing the economic consequences of what has been happening to us, to our neighbors, to basically the economy and society around us. But as we all know, when we come together as people across the world, and particularly through the eyes of local government and cities, and that is why I'm so pleased to be here today with Thembi, Carolina, and José Manuel, 3 mayors in 3 wonderful cities in 3 very different parts of the world, to reflect on what it means to have the opportunity to take action, to understand that we are in a terrible moment as communities, as a global family of nations, but that 2021 is also in many respects a turning point. I think we all sense that much of what has been happening in our world has already been like red alerts. We know that we have in our cities, in our communities, growing inequalities, growing disquiet, growing frustration. It did not begin with the pandemic. These were conditions, as we often say now, the underlying conditions that were there before. And it is particularly in cities where perhaps the drastic nature of inequality is most visible, most direct, and therefore also most offensive to those who see that we could do things differently. But zoom out for a moment, let's take a planetary look, because the Sustainable Development Goals, that so-called Agenda 2030, is a unique plan. It is a plan that 193 nations agreed in 2015. With these 17 goals, we identified also 17 major risks to ourselves. And it is by coming together that we need to address them. But today, and this is why this is also such an exciting session, you know, when we talk in planetary terms, it can sometimes get quite abstract. So let's zoom down again to where we live, to where we interact with our neighbors, to where our children go to school, where we maybe have the opportunity to have public transport or not, or have access to water and electricity or not. These are elements that define our lives in cities, and it is particularly through United Cities and Local Government, UCLG, that UNDP and mayors of the world, local governments and cities have developed a very strong partnership. To speak to the world together with you today is therefore a great privilege. And I just want to say that in UNDP, just like you have in United Cities and Local Government, we have begun to reflect very deeply about what it means to understand this moment in terms of the future of development. As we look forward to how countries, communities, societies will recover and hopefully build forward better from this moment, I think we have to also recognize that inequality is already a very defining reality. Just look at the phenomena of who has access to vaccines and who does not have access to vaccines. Look at how important it is to have a World Health Organization at this moment that thinks for everyone and not just for some. Because when there is pressure, it is always easier to retreat into one's own community. But a mayor cannot simply listen to one part of the city. A mayor has to cater to everybody in that city, however different the conditions may be, however unequal economic realities may be. And that is where we connect by principle, by vision, and by aspiration, also with the United Nations. And we as a United Nations Development Program are working in well over 150 countries around the world, and very often precisely at that level at which you as mayors are also leading our thinking. So much of what has happened in the last few months has also been dramatically illustrated in terms of either the ability to act or paralysis. Perhaps what we have also learned is that the significance, the centrality, and the ability to act, to lead, and to represent the spirit of people in the places they live is best expressed through local government, through the cities and the mayors and the municipalities in which people are actually able to do something about their reality. I hope that as we look today at these next few months and years together through the eyes of our fellow panelists, and particularly this notion of the pact for the future that United Cities and Local Government has been evolving as a way of framing, thinking, action, and also connection with others in moving forward. We will learn a lot about, Marina, you already referred to it, the social contract, the notion of green recovery, and also the fundamental fact that financing is central. Without money, you can do some things, but there are a lot of things you cannot do, particularly when you're dealing with a large city environment and where people at the moment are actually often not able to maybe look after themselves anymore. And that challenge of financing between central government, local government, citizens, but also the private sector, non-governmental societies, they're all part of the financial ecosystem that defines how a city moves forward. So let me end by just saying it's wonderful to be here with you. Thank you again for organizing this SDG Festival of Action. 2021 is a year of action for everyone, sometimes even in basic survival terms, sometimes in roles that we perhaps as mayors, I as head of the United Nations Development Program, can leverage in order to make opportunities happen. People are looking for ways forward. We are part of that solution, I hope. Let me begin by turning to Thembi, and I have her permission not to refer to her in the full official title you all know of her and of the city of Polokwane in South Africa. Thembi, if I may turn to you and speak a little bit to this notion of reconnecting with public institutions at the local level. Citizens at the moment very often perceive and describe government as either distant, as not responsive, as perhaps failing to provide basic services. And yet, as mayors, you are in touch with people every day. How are you able to generate trust? How, even with all the constraints you face, how do you get up in the morning and know that actually you can speak to your citizens with a degree of conviction and confidence that actually what you, together with the citizens of Polokwane, are trying to do is a kind of social contract. It is a kind of pact for the future that you are trying to develop with them. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon from my side. Good morning to others. Good evening to others as well. Akim, you are very right. I mean, our governments and local democracies in their very urban life today, and mostly in Africa communal, have dramatically been disturbed by the health crisis and consequence measures which have forced us rapidly to promote a healthy and safe environment. So as you are hearing more and more about reconnecting with institutions, and the current pandemic has not only exacerbated how far apart our communities have been before. Quite a number of our routines have been altered, which means we have been forced into flexible interpretation of laws immediately, legal frameworks, which sometimes have been actually challenging the legal framework of government itself. You not necessarily will have to enhance your disaster management acts to put cities and towns into lockdowns, to control movement, to stop business, to even in some instances threatening the postponement of elections. So the flexible interpretation which needs to be given to our people is very much important. Participation that is genuine, flexible, interdependency and connectedness of national government, provincial government and local government, putting in of social services from civil societies to ensure that they all have a voice. You could be able to delay for a certain extent some decisions, but as a local government, you do not have that liberty. You need to wake up every day, collect your refuse as per your schedule. You need to make sure that your personnel is healthy in the midst of that pandemic. You need to provide services, be it for social cohesion, be it for the very same health provision. You need to make sure in the midst of other climatic disasters, coupled with the pandemic, your roads are properly cleaned. Governing becomes slightly harder and needs to be prompt and faster. But it also showed us that some decisions, we no longer have time for them to lag behind, but rather to do them promptly with immediate consultation, yet be on time and be precise in terms of dealing with that. It has put pressure on municipalities and has indicated that the resources are less for us to respond promptly to the needs of our communities. The economic impact that negatively is as an outcome of COVID has put more pressure on our revenue outcomes as municipalities to ensure that we are able to provide the contesting needs that our people has. The younger generation, I'm happy when Marina was saying there's quite a lot of young people who are connected here, because you tend to take a look, there's a lack of trust in our framework by young people. They feel they don't respond, they don't talk to them, but our voices are equally not heard fast enough as we should. So citizenship in terms of promoting and ensuring that young people are part of what we want to do on a day-to-day, I think it's important, and it garners the trust, but it also gears us to a handover to a generation that comes after us. Because if we leave them behind and give us, The solidarity with regard to governance and societies among people is also critical. So globalization and the global society allows us now, unfortunately by force, to talk on a day-to-day basis. Hence the importance of World Health Organization to protect the poor and vulnerable, to promote the rights of life equally for everybody on the pedestal. I think maybe let me conclude for my other colleagues to touch on possibly the relationship of the UNDP and UCLG, turning things around to ensure that there is a permanent bridge now between our cities that care and listen at an international sphere, multilateralism that can benefit from this for all of us to evolve fast, to be inclusive and to be relevant. Then the Sustainable Development Goals will help us as many cities to reconnect with other cities. Let me thank you, Akim, and my colleagues. Let me hear from other mayors. It's a very beautiful platform. How I feel it was live, but I'm feeling it. Thank you very much.
Well, Tembi, just listening to you, I wish I could sit in one of your town hall meetings, because I'm sure you have a fascinating discussion. Just before I move to Carolina, let me just ask you, share with us just a moment where, you know, as a mayor, you had to maybe step into a meeting in a neighborhood with those young people that you just described. South Africa has had to go through some very heavy lockdowns as well. How do you manage the pressure that on the one hand, you have to explain and rationalize a decision that is taken in the national interest at national level, but the person who sits, you know, in that neighborhood with the citizens, maybe the young people who see their parents' shops being closed and basically seeing bankruptcy emerging on the horizon, how do you connect with them and give them a sense of hope or perhaps understanding? Because that's where mayors really are the front line. So maybe just share with us in 1 minute a sort of moment where you experienced that.
Well, you know, as a result of the pandemic and the climate change in the main, we had to share water. In our African continent, water is still much a scarce resource as it is in the world. But you find that we had to introduce systems like water shedding. And young people, generally, they are up and going. They need to be able to be involved in the economy. And once you begin to watershed, it means you control and box their life of when to start and when to stop. I just had an engagement of such with young people last week. And they were feeling that government one doesn't open a space for them to actively participate. But we even leave them behind on the reasoning why such decisions have to be taken, for them to understand, but for them to comprehend, but also for them to participate and find solutions together with government. So we've had, for example, contrary to the lack of rains, we then had the cyclone, you know, opposite of the drought. And now we have massive water in our dams, but now we do not have sufficient capacity to ensure that the turbidity of the water is controlled daily to be able to supply the water. And they were like, Mayor, you are now playing with us. Last week you were saying there's no rain. Now it has rained. We have moved from 10% to 70%. Now you still can't give us water. So it has always been a contest that I think connecting with them on a day-to-day basis is what makes local government real compared to other governments. It's a bit strenuous, it's a bit tight, but I think that's the heart of where people are. And that's the heart of the localization of SDGs, because it assists to really move with the people, be prompt, be on the ground, be specific about what are the problems are and what are the solutions.
All I can say is amen. I mean, this is what makes people, you know, people do not doubt that things are complicated, and they know that there are sometimes no magic wands. What they want is honesty, transparency, and a commitment to not walk away from the problems. And I'm sure in the way you've just conveyed that, you will have persuaded many of them. So Tembi, we'll come back a little bit later. Let me quickly turn to Carolina, Mayor of the amazing city of Montevideo. also in the midst of a pandemic, Uruguay has been doing some remarkable things and at the same time has been part of the front line of COVID-19. But if I may turn to you, Carolina, for a moment with that planetary perspective and how one takes something that is in the atmosphere called climate change, that conference of the parties meet on, scientists spend years researching, and there you are as mayor of Montevideo with all the pressures, not perhaps so different from what Tembi just described. Can you tell us for a moment, how do you even begin to think about that notion of a green recovery? Because cities will be at the front line of our ability to decarbonize, but also to protect biodiversity, to deal with pollution, air quality. 7 million people die prematurely every year because of pollution. This is the 21st century. And yet in our cities, it's very often that is a point of concentration, maybe not any longer in Montevideo. So how do you go about in your role as mayor and with Montevideo in addressing what sometimes are planetary challenges and phenomena, but ultimately are solved or become solvable at the local level, and particularly in a city like Montevideo? Carolina, over to you.
Well, first, thank you very much for letting me participate in this very interesting conference. Thank you very much for the question. Well, let me address the issue in the framework, in the situation that we are living, because our understanding is that the recovery, the green recovery from the COVID-19 crisis across the world, and in particular in my country, requires strong action from local governments in two aspects. The first is that must be recognized the urgency as a result by the increased poverty and inequality, as you said at the very beginning. And second is the need to have a medium and long-term vision that help us moving towards an environmentally sound city. So we have to combine both aspects in order to advance. For the first aspect, concerning poverty and inequality increased in all the world, but also in my country, in Montevideo, we are deploying the ABC plan, which stands for Basic Citizenship Support in Spanish. We are in a social and economic context of acute impoverishment, thousands of job losses, and diminution of real wages of workers. So the government of Montevideo, through this plan, through the ABC plan, is implementing in 2021 a set of measures to address the negative impacts of this situation. The objective is to attend to the most vulnerable populations, recognizing the variety of critical situations and acting as quickly as we can as the emergency imposed. The proposals that we have in the IBC plan seek to reinforce solidarity and improve the living conditions for the most affected people, weaving networks of encounter and integration with more protagonism for communities, opportunities for growth, and access to universal rights. To achieve this, we deploy articulated initiatives, mainly food support, gender equality, generation of job opportunities, local reinforcement to health, and improvements in houses and habitats, rapid interventions in roads, rainwater drainage, lighting and public spaces, recovery of abandoned houses and buildings, and purchase of land for housing. This is our response to the poverty and inequality. But at the same time, as I said at the beginning, we are developing initiatives that aim for cultural changes. And I would like to highlight two of them. One is the Greener Montevideo Initiative strategy. And the second is the healthy food, I don't know to say in English, healthy food or healthy eating strategy, but it's healthy food strategy. The first one, the Greener Montevideo strategy. In Spanish is Montevideo Más Verde. This program seeks to take Montevideo towards a qualitative leap in terms of cleanliness and environmental care. It aims to extend the concept of shared responsibility, not as a sole component, of course, but along with specific management actions and changes addressed to public spaces and waste recovery to the whole city, and at the same time addressing aspects of environmental quality, reduction of waste on public roads, and improvement of collection and recovery mechanisms as at source. Montevideo Más Verde also seeks to address issues of urban ecosystems and biodiversity, starting in wetlands, coastal areas and creeks, but also going inland into public spaces. Such measures are built upon the concept of green resilient strategies and nature-based solutions that can ensure new approaches to the climate and sustainability agenda, both local and worldwide. The second program is the Healthy Food Strategy that seeks to contribute to the right to food for all Montevideans in the urban, peri-urban, and rural areas. These initiatives should not be seen separately, but as a part of a strategy to seek comprehensive solutions to challenging problems so that the recovery from the pandemic can be seen, as you said, must be seen also as a source of opportunities. But perhaps this crisis brings from all of us the best of everyone, and together, not one by one, we can work to produce this turning point that you said at the beginning. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Carolina, and thank you for also making it so explicit that when one talks about a green recovery, this is not only about green things, it's about people, it's about livelihoods, it's about neighborhoods, it's about infrastructure. I mean, these are the opportunities that lead us to the future. Can I just ask you in 30 seconds, how do people who often are very challenged and stressed right now respond to you when you raise that kind of example? And could you just say in 30 seconds how that works?
Well, it works with a lot of work from us, a lot of commitment, a very strong presence in the neighborhoods, mostly in the most vulnerable neighborhoods, and with actions, not only speeches, but reflect thinking, share the thinking, listening, a lot of deep listening, and after that action, measuring the results, listening again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And as you say, the continuous engagement is one of the privileges perhaps of mayors, because you are there. And sometimes in national politics, one seems very far away from where people act. Let me now turn to Jose Manuel Ribeiro. As Mayor of Valongo, but also in the context of United Cities and local government, we wanted to explore with you, Jose, this notion of funding and financing. Clearly, a lot of what Tendi and Carolina have just spoken about, that I'm sure you are also leading in your city, depends on funding, financing, investment, be it tax it, be it federal government allocations in terms of budget, be it the ability to borrow money in the financial markets to invest in the development infrastructure of a city. Can you share with us a little bit what is happening in this field? Because we know that there is a chronic challenge of financing at local government, city, municipality level. What are some of the perhaps financial and new financial instruments that you are thinking about, that you see in cities across the world, that will enable the kind of ideas, whether it's an ABC plan, the sort of initiatives Tembi spoke about, to actually be implementable, because without money, there is an enormous limitation of what one can do. Jose Manuel, over to you.
Hello, good morning. First of all, thank you for this very kind invitation. It's great to share ideas, not only words. We are sharing ideas, and discussing SDG goals. It's the right discussion. I think, let me say that we are in a pandemic, but if we don't do nothing with lots of problems we have, especially with planet, I think we could have bigger problems than the pandemic. It's my opinion, of course. I think it's a big deal we have, and we have to face it with courage. And hello to my colleagues, mayors from America and from Africa, Marina, Steiner, all the present here. What I can say is, listen, at the local level, I'm a mayor in a European country. We have our resource, our sources of financement is Portuguese budget, European money. So it's a particular, as you know very well, and in fact, we have resources, of course. When I was invited to share some ideas, I think this question of the challenge of the Sustainable Development Goals force us to think about the problem. First of all, we have, before talking about money, we have to discuss this new concept of green infrastructures. We have to teach people about it, because we are, in a way, people all over the world, when you talk about infrastructures, immediately they think about gray infrastructures, cement infrastructures, roads, streets. I'm not saying that it's not important, of course it is, but we have to give them more information saying, listen, you have green infrastructures. You can develop, but with a new modus operandi, a new model. If we talk about green infrastructure, about goals, different kind of goals, then we can launch ideas for financing. For example, we don't have a planet Earth tax, for example. But what kind of tax? A tax that every country would love to pay. And then you say, wow, you are crazy. Nobody likes to pay tax. No, that's the point. We need to create a planet Earth tax with a philosophy, with a kind of reciprocity principle that would pay, that would grant, that would generate resources for financing SDG goal implementation. Because if you don't do that, we will have always this discussion. There's no money, there's no, listen, and it's not difficult. If you see that in 2019, you had 4.5 billion people, passengers, with 10 cents, it's about 500 million. But you can put stock market business, you can put for example, the companies that sell armament, it's okay, they would love to pay that tax, because there is the question of implementation. And that point, it would be, to work, we need to put the United Nations, but of course, national governments, but to the implementation, the local level, because you could put more, accountability, because but this idea of a planet Earth tax that could tax human behavior, because it's the point, if we want to reach the goals, you have to change human behavior. Okay, we have to keep our humanness, like it's what I say every day during the pandemic. Let's resist this virus, but keep our humanness. But during these, I know that it's very simple to say, but it's an idea. I was invited to share ideas. So answering your question, more than giving examples, we are doing, listen, in my country, in my municipality, 5 years ago, we decided to create a big infrastructure in Porto metropolitan area. It's a reality. We created a big park with 60 square kilometers. It's a reality. It's a contribution to SDG goals, but it's not enough. And I'm really finishing in less than 1 minute. So the idea is we really need to put, these principles again. People need goals. People need again to hear about reciprocity principles, because we need that. That could change a lot of things. So I hope it's useful, but it's an idea. It's a simple idea.
Well, Jose, first of all, thank you for making it very clear that if you don't have a vision, you don't have goals, you don't know where to go. But you also made an interesting point, and the reality perhaps of your being a mayor in a European Union, which is part of the, let's say, financial economy that has also invested in a region such as Europe over a period of years and years in order to have investment capital made available, the budget of the Portuguese government and the local financing. Those are interesting building blocks. And then there is that global, as you say, planetary tax. There has been a proposal in the past, a Tobin tax. There has been a proposal to tax airline tickets. I think we are coming closer to this, particularly when people believe that the funds that are raised from such a tax can actually land on the ground and do real good. And you just described an example. I mean, a 60 square kilometer park. I mean, that is a net addition to nature, to quality of life, to the attractiveness of the economy of your city. But people often, have a, as you say, perhaps a challenged relationship with notions of taxes. It is something that takes money away from each one of us. But in many countries, people also see what it does for their society, social safety nets, health and education systems. And when that social contract, so I come back to where we started our discussion, when that social contract is alive and well, then paying taxes is viewed as a good investment for me, my children, and my community. Yes, Jose, just the last 30 seconds and then
It's very brief. The problem with respect with Tobin, the problem is the name. You cannot call it Tobin tax. You must call it Planet Earth tax. Let me say, it's a kind of rewarding mechanism. And one more thing, and first of all, we cannot reach, we won't be able to reach SDG goals if we don't, for example, we have nowadays a problem of moral failure with the vaccine process. Rich have vaccines, poor don't have. If you don't tackle these, it's only talk. Please understand my words. You have immediate challenges to face. Thank you very much.
We have seen that COVAX facility, again, it's a strange name. Perhaps we should have come up with a global vaccine facility as a simpler name. It is beginning to deliver vaccines to countries that otherwise may not have got them till next year. And that is what the World Health Organization is doing with taxpayers' money. And the money only started arriving in the last few weeks. The appeals have been going on for months. So this is where I think we can demonstrate that coming together, acting together, but also pooling our resources works. Now we only have about 5 minutes left, and I want to do a very quick pivot back to Tembi, then to Carolina and to Jose on something quite practical. A couple of years ago, I saw the mayor of Medellin speak about how he had taken the 17 SDGs and applied them to his city of Medellin. As a practical guide, and Tembi, you referred to it at the beginning, the goals, yes, they are planetary, they are global, but how realistic, how useful is it to apply the SDG framework to the reality of Polokwane today? And does it provide a useful way of thinking about the development choices that you have to make, how to integrate the social, the environmental, the economic? Maybe just in a minute or so, if you could reflect a little bit on application of these goals to your reality and that of your citizens.
I think it does. And I think it's not only do it in terms of the city where I am. By their very own nature, SDGs are forcing mayors around the world to react to the inequalities and the economic and social injustice. So they are forcing us to create caring cities across the world. A world where you could be able to live in it, whether you are in the SADC or whether you are in Africa, whether you are in Europe or anywhere else with the same acceptable standard. So caring all along has possibly been the missing weight of the puzzle, but today we are able to say we have access to all what we could be able to give, but we can promote as cities in collaboration with the government. And that's what SDG says. Systems, structures, framework, basic services to all in an equal way, equal manner, to ensure that your people are promoted, planet is promoted, and government give the services to the two. Thank you very much. I think that's what we could strive for.
Andy,
Yes.
thank you for being so crystal clear. A quick pivot to Carolina. SDGs, Montevideo, in practice, in reality, doable, useful?
Yes, they are. And I should say that when you have a responsibility, a government responsibility, that is my thinking, you have to work for the present, but mainly for the future. And the future has to be with the generational responsibility. The future, we have to work to take care of our planet because it's our home forever. So we have to really work for the future. So having a set of guidelines help us to have a framework, a common framework for the planet, to do plans and things and actions, but mainly having the future, taking the future to the present. So I'm very grateful.
It's a very powerful thought, bringing the future into the present. I mean, that is part of the intergenerational dimension. We only have 1 minute left, so José Manuel, to your reality. Vision, goals, and then suddenly, how do you take an SDG framework and apply it to your city, to your reality? And is that a useful way to use the SDGs?
Oh, yes, of course. We are doing it for the last years. We invest millions in behavior, changing behavior of our citizen. That's the first step. We do a lot of things at schools because it's the beginning. But for example, we created the park. We invest a lot in, for example, a recent project, putting local producers of agriculture selling locally. It's and using internet, using a platform. Very simple things. We have dozens of projects, but the first is investing in changing the behavior of people. For example, transparency in my country, in my municipality, people know where the money goes. Every cent for the last 7 years. It's important to bring trust.
Thank you. José, we will, as part of this event, put up the websites of your respective cities so people can immediately look at how you have done this, whether it's transparency, an ABC program, or TEMBI in the context of COVID-19, the kind of urgent measures that you had to set up. Let me end my part just by saying that as the United Nations Development Programme, we're extremely proud of working with United Cities and local government. We work with many, many mayors, municipalities across the world. It is our appreciation, but also understanding of the importance of local government, of mayors as leaders of communities that will drive development, that will connect the present, that is often, both legacy and opportunity, to that future that Carolina just spoke about. And the SDGs for us are in many ways the connective tissue that allows us to speak about the reality in Polokwane while discussing climate change as a global phenomenon, to talk about poverty and inequality while at the same time talking about the investment in a park in your city, José. And these are the conversations that connect us as humanity, as citizens, as people. And I want to end by thanking also, I see Mini Mbesa translating, interpreting for us in terms of sign language. Asante sana to Nairobi, Kenya. Marina, thank you for bringing us all together. This has been a really wonderful session.